Good afternoon. It's Wednesday afternoon, and unlike last week when we were having a hurricane here in New England, it looks outside right now like we're having a blizzard. We're having a nice snowstorm, a nice early November snowstorm, and just proving what November in New England can be like. We could wake up tomorrow and have it be tropical again. So, welcome to Hess Hall, room 208, where normally on this snowy afternoon I'd probably be delivering an ethics class right now. But instead, seeing as late afternoon classes got canceled, I have a great opportunity to use this classroom to talk to everybody about what we're doing this week in the business policy seminar. So let me pick up on that. What we're doing now is we're now moving into where we're going to be working hard for the next 5 weeks. And you know what? It's going to be a trying experience for some. It might be fun for others, but this is where we hit the group project. All right? So the group project is kind of the culmination of everything you've been doing for the last, well, for some of you, 4 years in college. And the reason we do a group project, the reason I do a group project, is because it simulates the work you're going to be doing in the corporate world. Particularly now, remote work is becoming the norm, not so much an oddity. And frequently we find ourselves, as I said in the old video that I included, we find ourselves working with my marketing teams in New York, my production teams in Detroit, may have a sales office in Japan, everything. The globalization issues are all there. So we find ourselves working with people from all over, not necessarily face to face, and that's kind of the atmosphere I'm trying to simulate here. This case I've chosen is a case I wrote based on some real life events, as it says in the introduction, back in the early 90s. And the real company was named Malden Mills, and it was a privately held company, and it did have this catastrophic fire. And the case primarily comes from the business ethics literature. Malden Mills was a company that was a family company. Like I said, it was the kind of the mainstay of the town of Lawrence, Massachusetts, and it had this catastrophic fire and burned down. And the CEO was a gentleman by the name of Aaron Firestein. And Firestein became very famous in the business world for some of the actions he took after the fire. Well, we're not all about, in this class, giving a report on what Firestein actually did and what actually became of his company. I'm using this case as a way to stretch your imagination a little bit. Because when I read this case again in order to prepare to use it in an ethics class about a year ago, I sat back and said, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't just an ethics case, this is a strategy case. Firestein and his business were faced with a tremendous strategic problem, right? A market leader gets destroyed by a catastrophic fire. Look at all the decisions now that are there. What are we going to do? How are we going to get back in business? Are we going to get back in business? Should we get back in business? Where should we get back in business? How? All these questions come up, and as you can see, they're all strategic questions. So your mission, as is laid out in the case, is to work as part of a team, as a consultant to the characters that we have come up with, and I've renamed him as Jake Farnsworth here. Guess what? You're to help Jake figure out what his next strategic move is for now and the foreseeable future. Now, what happens here? As you noticed in the discussion board in the last week, there's several of you folks that I made some individual comments to remind everybody to think big. What's probably happening here is very predictable. When I see a class online, it's usually got a lot of people with a lot of business experience in it. Okay, a lot of people who've been in the business world, many of you are military recruiters, and boy, that is a business situation. And you all have some experiences, and you all know certain technical areas of business. And what happens sometimes is when we start talking about the strategic issues, we try to frame them in the context of the things we know. We start to look at them very narrowly. This is what I know. This is what it's got to be all about. Well, you got to think bigger than that on some of you. You got to remember the strategy it's wide. It's a big picture type of thing. It's trying to figure out where you're going to be now, 5 years from now, 10 years, maybe 50 years from now. This is strategy. This is what it's all about. So I urge you to go back and look at that first video that we had from Michael Porter a week or two ago, the one I think where he calls, what does he call it? What is strategy? And Porter is in there telling us about, you know, when people say, well, my strategy is to internationalize, or my strategy is to cut costs. What are they really saying? That's not really a strategy, is it? That's a tactic. That's a method for implementing a strategy. So that's the plane I want you to be thinking at. All right? It's going to be an interesting project. I'll tell you how I assign the groups. Literally, I let the machine do it. Blackboard just randomly assigns people into groups. So no method to my madness here. I'm going to let the computer do the work. You guys have the job of going ahead and crafting a strategy. How long should it be? What should the project look like? What do we need to do? The whole idea is to come up with, by over the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks, an executive level presentation. You're to develop a strategy and come up with how you want to present it. And because we're not all sitting here in one classroom together, about the only thing that's not on the table is a face-to-face presentation. You can do a report, you can do a PowerPoint, you can do a video, you can do a combination of all three. What would you do if you were presenting your findings to the executive group, to the senior ownership, the leaders of this corporation, who need to know what your input is on how are they going to get back on their feet? And maybe that input is, we're not going to get back on our feet, we're going to go in an entirely different direction. So as you've noticed, the only thing I've taken off the table, there's only one answer to the case that's not available to you, and that is, let's take the insurance money and run. Okay? That one you can't do. That's the only one you can't do. Everything else is open to you. Relocation, new products, new customers, all these kind of things are available. That's why I've brought in a lot of these almost marketing-oriented videos. And as you can see this week, there's several other new ones. I'm just going to stroll over here to the computer and say, look, just take a look. We have things, well, John Gertzema, who talks this week about a lot about how the consumer is reacting today and how things are different. This is a very interesting video made right at the end of right at the tail end of the crash, when things were sort of hitting the bottom in the last recession. All right? Have over here one I think is very important to watch. It's very entertaining, if you ask me. This is Rory Sutherland, if you haven't watched it yet. He's a British advertising guy, all right? And so maybe some of the references might not be that familiar to you, but listen to what he says. He's got a very entertaining style, but buried in there are some messages about value creation. That's what he's really talking about, is value creation. That's what you need to do now, is start thinking about, how do we help this company that's almost been totally destroyed recreate value? All right? So if it's not clear in the written instructions, you're starting as if that fire happened yesterday. We're not looking for a report on what actually happened to Aaron Firestein and Malden Mills. We're looking for your report on what happens for Jake Farnsworth and Family Fabrics. How do we do this going forward? What is our strategy? How are we going to put this together? Is it going to be executable? Is it going to be something that we can work with? All right? Does this make sense to everybody? I hope so. I think that this has been one of the most effective projects I've used. I change the case every once in a while. And this one is, I think, the second time we've done this case online. And I've seen some very, very interesting methods. And I'm going to keep giving you tools and methods over the next 4 or 5 weeks to help you get to where you want to be, which is developing effective strategies. Okay, so I wanted to do that a little bit. Let me just so you can see how crazy things are, I'm going to pick up this camera and walk over here. And while I'm still talking to you guys about what's going on here, this is the weather we have on campus this afternoon. So you can see it's just a little bit different than what we might expect on a late fall afternoon. It looks more like midwinter. So that's just a taste of where we are in Connecticut. This is back in Hess Hall, and I'm coming back in here and try to figure out what if I can make this camera stay in here. Hope you liked the little tour, and I'm back in the camera range, and now the door's wide open, so if people come up the stairs, they're really going to think I'm talking to nobody. So If there are any questions, please get to me. Let me review again. Real quick, discussion board has been really good. Keep things up. I know last week was kind of crazy with a hurricane, okay, and so a lot of people